Hello, my name is Bob Royer. I'm a member of the Berrywood Watershed Committee. In the past, I was president of the BCA in the late 1980s, and then in the early 90s, I was on the Berrywood Swim and Tennis Committee. My wife and I have lived here in Berrywood since 1978, and we raised 3 boys over here, all of them who were very active in life around the Cattail Creek and Magathy River. They all started water skiing at very young ages of around 3 years old, and we always said they have Magathy River saltwater in their veins. Still very much enjoy when they come home to water ski over here. They were all part of the Berrywood swim team at very early ages, and most recently, our oldest and youngest sons swam a 28.5-mile swim marathon between 2 of the Hawaiian Islands. John did his actual practicing for that in the Magathy River. And when the reporter asked them where did they get their love of swimming, they said it was in their home community of Berrywood, from the swim team as well as the life on the Magathy River. So we owe a lot to Berrywood and very much love it to the point where we want to make sure that that resource is sustained. Not only Berrywood's facilities in terms of the marina, but as well as the Magathy River and Cattail Creek. In the past, we were very much concerned with regard to stormwater management and the erosion effects it was having in the Cattail Creek area around Marina 1, and had applied for several grants in the past for stormwater management. The last of those efforts was late last year, for which we had been declined, where the response was that our efforts were not significant enough really to have a significant enough effect on stormwater management. Sensing our frustration with that, Marion Clement from the Habitat Restoration Group in Department of Natural Resources with the state spearheaded efforts to get a grant to support Berrywood in completely restoring the Cattail Creek stream area in the Berrywood Marina section over there. Timing on that actually couldn't have been more perfect, because right now the last major refurbishment we did to the Marina 1 area come next year is going to be about 25 years. And so a lot of things are well overdue for a maintenance upgrade. So what we plan to do is synergize these 2 efforts to have a coordinated design between our upgrade of the marina and the restoration of the creek. A very exciting endeavor for the near future for Berrywood as well as Maryland State DNR. What we're going to do today is give you a presentation in here of effectively about 80 photographs that are going to give you a photo tour of the watershed area and what it looks like above stream of the Cattail Creek in Berrywood, so you can have a full understanding of what feeds into our area. We'll then go to show what is the nature of the problem, the kind of erosions that we've been experiencing, and then some discussion of what the remediation for that will be. We'll also kind of take a look at some of the areas of need of repair of the bulkhead, the deck, the decking, as finger piers, as well as the parking lot and some alternative pervious pavers and stuff that we would like to consider. And in addition to that, another whole effort associated with the preservation of the forested land around Cattail Creek stream. It has been overcome in the past by a number of non-native invasive species that have threatened the life of a lot of our very mature tall canopy trees, young saplings, and a lot of our lower level shrubs. So we applied for a grant with the Chesapeake Bay Trust in conjunction with the Anne Arundel Forestry, and we're successful in obtaining that grant. And that work has already started. So we're going to be showing some of the photographs of what we've already done to remove the invasive vegetation there, and what some of the exciting new plantings and reforestation efforts that we'll be doing in the upcoming months, starting this fall going into next year. Here we see an aerial photograph of the watershed that goes all the way up to the Severn River at the top of the photograph that you see over there. And then coming down in the slightly right of center is the Severna Park High School, and then running horizontally, slightly diagonal in the middle is Ritchie Highway. And then you can see sort of a Y branch there of 648, one part going out to Ritchie Highway, the other turning into Asbury Road. So you'll see there are three major areas over there of the watershed area on the west of Ritchie Highway, and then east of Ritchie Highway, and then down right adjacent to our Marina 1. Here we see a slightly closer in perspective with some notation where you can see in that upper right, we call that the Cattail Creek Natural Area. East of that, and east in this case is down, is the Cattail Creek watershed, and then Cattail Creek in Berrywood. Here's further annotated detail. We'll start up in the Cattail Creek natural area. One note over here, you can see there where there is a yellow perch spawning area, and then they're connecting to that. That body of water connects to the remaining part of the watershed through a viaduct or culvert underneath Ritchie Highway. You might notice that in the upper left part of that Cattail Creek natural area is the area of the contemplated Cattail Commons townhouse complex that we're very much opposed to being developed because of the impact it'll have on that natural area. South of, east of that, like we mentioned, into the next area is a major bog that also has coming from it the waters to the from the areas associated with Kinder Park branch coming in, feeding into that same part, and that's by virtue of a culvert that goes right about in the middle there of Route 648 feeding into that. Then those two particular areas feed that bog, which then goes through a culvert underneath Town Neck, Asbury Town Neck, connecting into the start of our creek area. Over here is a recent photograph that was taken of the Cool Pond area that I had mentioned, which is just a little bit down from the high school. While it's a very pretty looking photograph, you might notice that the waters over there are kind of cloudy, and this has been one of the issues that have been brought up in the last 6 months with the Magathie River Association in terms of problems as a result of the new high school construction and how that has damaged, because of severe siltation, that area. That's important to us because that is one of the feed areas upstream from us, and that is one of the areas which it has been mentioned that there will be some restoration efforts in that Cool Pond area. Here's a photograph that was taken several years ago of the Cattail Creek natural area. As you can see, it's very lush with a lot of vegetation. The area that you're looking at over here in the far distance there is the very area in which the Cattail Commons townhouse complex is to be built. Needless to say, you can see where there would be a tremendous impact on a lot of the canopy trees, the specimen trees, and this is one of the many reasons which we're very much opposed to that development. Here is another view of the pond taking from a different, from the opposite direction, in which you can see it's very, very rich in aquatic vegetation. Very much important part of purifying the water that comes into that bog and making it very productive. In this photograph over here of the Cattail Creek natural area, we can see some of the wooded areas that are very critical to the watershed's survivability. In addition to the plant life taking out the nutrients and and biological contaminants. One of the important things, of course, for the large trees is to be able to do a lot of the water absorption. So that in the case of large storms and stuff, to be able to absorb much of this water into the ground. One of the other major areas that is important for ponds and bogs like this is to remove a contaminant that many people are not even aware of, and that's silt. A lot of times when we have a lot of the large storms and the like, much of the debris, the dirt, and everything from asphalted areas get washed off and into the creek. And this is very, very fine particulate matter that stays suspended in the water and causes great problems when it enters into the creeks. The reason for this is this fine particulate causes the cloudiness in the water, which prevents the sunlight from being able to impinge all the way down to the bottom of the creek to allow the subaquatic vegetation to grow. These grasses and subaquatic vegetation are critical in terms of being able to provide the oxygen that's needed to keep the lower level oxygenation level of the water at higher levels. When this is absent, it causes a lot of problems because then we get plant life growing down there that's anaerobic, which is basically slimes and that type of stuff, that cause many, many problems. And when those kinds of vegetation die, they consume even further oxygen, which causes a complete breakdown of the quality of the water. This usually happens late in the summertime area where we see algae blooms of basically the algae and slime on the bottom of the river coming up to the top. Very much a indication of a very negative situation of the health of the creek. Over here we actually see an active beaver dam that is in the pond area just before the culvert that goes underneath Ritchie Highway over here. You can see they're pretty active builders over there, and the dam is very productive in terms of being able to slow that water down during storm surges and also help to provide as a filter for some of the larger elements moving downstream. Here we see where the pond enters underneath Ritchie Highway by virtue of a viaduct or culvert, if you will. It's a cement structure that's about 2.5 feet tall and about 10 to 12 feet wide. So obviously it can pass a lot of water through underneath Ritchie Highway there. In this picture, we're taking a look straight through the viaduct or the culvert. You can see down at the end of the photograph is the exit. Where that exit is right about where the Precision Tune and Lube is. And you could see inside here its capability for passing a huge volume of water. Here we can see, just to give you some bearings, this is Ritchie Highway, and the landmark over there is the utility poles with the transformers. You can see that is the entrance of the viaduct. It's not necessarily safe to walk along there because there's not much of a shoulder, but if you were to look over the guardrail there, that's exactly where you would see the beaver dam. Okay, in this next slide we see over here is the next bog area, and this one is, this shot was taken from Asbury Road looking away from the Berrywood Marina area there. It's a very beautiful watershed area there, and this takes all of the water that you'd seen from that culvert viaduct from across Ritchie Highway, but then also has blended with it water that came in across Route 648 that came in from the other branch of Cattail Creek I mentioned to you earlier, from the Kinder Park and the middle school area, as well as runoff from upper parts of Ritchie Highway. As you can see, there's a lot of vegetative diversity, which is good. I will mention to you that this area is also an area of concern in which there is a 4-house complex that's being built right on the peripheral edge over here that impinges right up against this bog, which is also of great concern for us in terms of the potential that new housing complex there will cause even more further runoff going into immediately right into our Cattail Creek area. This picture here depicts the culvert going underneath Asbury Town Neck Road. You might sort of take a look at it and say the concrete looks new, and that's because it is. It was recently built last year. So you can see from the level of the staining on the sides of that concrete pipe, the levels at which the water gets up to during storm surges and the like. You can see right now it's kind of below, if you will, sort of the main stain line over there, but you can see it gets quite high, which represents a huge column of water coming at very rapid speed feeding into that area. This will be of importance when I talk to you a little bit further about what the nature is of some of the problems that we have with the creek erosion. Here we are on the other side. We're at the exit of the culvert, and what feeds that culvert feeds something that we call a fish ladder. This aluminum structure over here is a device that is intended to enable the yellow perch that spawn in this area to actually be able to swim upstream. There's a labyrinth within there, so to speak, of a herringbone type compartmentalized areas that we'll show shortly to you that represent a way by which the fish can swim from ladder rung to ladder rung, so to speak, to be able to go up into these bog areas to be able to spawn. Good news here is that not only in this area, but in the areas of around Lake Waterford and those streams area, Paul Spadaro from the Magathie River Association has shown that we've actually had viable yellow perch eggs spawning over there, which is very, very good news over here in terms of saying that the creek is not dead yet and very much alive, and something that we need to do to be able to help restore it and get it back into good shape. Here's a detail of inside actually the fish ladder, for which you can see those walls on the side there, or is that herringbone pattern that I had mentioned. And the water flow in this case goes from the bottom up. So what happens is that with that stream of water going through there, the main stream right down the middle is going downstream, but there are actually little eddy pools that are along the side over there that enable the fish to swim easier upstream. So here is actually, this photograph was taken over 10 years ago, but represents pretty much what we're looking for. Is here you've got clear water coming out of that viaduct. Unfortunately today it looks a lot more turbid than that. Again, a lot of it based upon at the point of origination at Cool Pond, a lot of those kinds of actions with the siltation and stuff is having an impact further downstream. So we're very much happy for those efforts that are going on right now to clean up the Cool Pond area, because that will enable the natural area to do an even better job of removing that silt before it even enters our area here in Cattail Creek. Here we have a photograph that was taken in the spring of this year. You see there is Marion Clement, as we had mentioned, who is the habitat restoration lead in DNR with her boss, Kevin. And at this point in time, they're examining the fish ladder there, you can see. And you can see it was kind of a cloudy day that day, and the reason they were down there is that this was the aftermath. The previous 2 days were some fairly heavy rainstorms, and they wanted to see what was the condition of the creek at that point in time. So not only were they looking at water clarity and that type of thing, but what was more important to them, and we'll explain this a little bit further down in the slides to come, is they wanted to see what did the stream look like in terms of how much water was in the confines of the channel of the stream itself versus being up on the banks and into the floodplain. A healthy stream would have shown that as a result of many heavy days of rainfall, the floodplain would be doing what it should be doing, which is absorbing the water. And in fact, what they had found is that all of the water was completely contained within the confines of the steep walls of the stream. Not a good thing. So you'll see further over here, as we define the nature of that problem, the whole idea of what we must do in terms of restoring that creek is to connect the stream with the floodplain so that the floodplain and all the associated aquatic vegetation and swamp plants can do their job. This photograph was taken around 10 or 11 years ago. And at that point in time, this particular area is in a sort of unique spot on the creek, whereby in the late 70s, Berrywood went off of septic and had city sewer put in. And that sewer line meandered all through Berrywood, comes through the athletic field, and connects up with the sewage pumping station by virtue of a crossing that actually goes across the creek. And that sewer line was buried below the creek bottom, and then on top of that had a lot of these riprap type rocks that you see put on it, with a concrete armor that was placed over that, with on the banks of both sides of that was riprap rocks and concrete. And unfortunately, over the years, due to some very large storms that we've had, it has destroyed that armoring, where the torrent of the water coming through there was so strong, it broke that concrete up and actually lifted pieces of it and deposited it further downstream, causing all kind of problems with adverse currents that are causing, or part of the cause of the parking lot erosion there. But one of the things that you'll see from this photograph over here is that further downstream, past the rocky concrete embankments, you'll see that the creek bottom and the connection of the sidewalls is gradual. There is not a steep definition of the creek looking like a trench. If you, and we'll see a few more photographs again of what it looked like 10 years ago, and then we'll switch to today. Here's yet another one of the file footage photographs, again, 10 or so years ago. Again, you can see the rocky bottom, but if you look further out there, you'll see that the sidewalls of the creek are somewhat gradual, where it's easier for the floodwaters to be able to get up onto the banks of the stream to do a natural widening. Okay, this is fast forward to today. Here's where you can see, this is a little bit further down from where the culvert is. You can see the huge amount of difference between the edge of the shore and almost a cliff there of a distance of, we're talking about around 1.5 to 2 feet over there. You can see that sheer drop with the water kind of undercutting the edge of that stream. So what's happening over here is, because of the high volume of high velocity water coming through that culvert, as this is kind of a self-aggravating situation over here, that high velocity water is lifting the bottom of the creek. Well, what I mean that is it's getting all of that sand and silt at the sandy bottom of the creek and putting it into solution with the water and carrying all of that as a silt and sedimentation into the creek, most of it being deposited right at the base where Cattail Creek, the bulkhead is, and especially the launching ramp. You'll see that in a few minutes. In this slide, again, you can sort of see, we're lining our camera view here just to give you a view of the sheer drop over here, where the water you can sort of see is, if you will, in kind of a canyon wall there. As you can imagine, it would take a huge volume of water for that water ever to get up onto the land into the floodplain where it needs to be for those high volume water situations. Here's yet another view at a different point in the creek. You can see how the creek kind of naturally tries to protect itself with a sort of a mossy cover on some of these sidewalls and some vine type of vegetation over there. But again, the same problem remains in that the creek bottom is way down below the edges of the stream bank. Okay, here we are much, much further down the stream, very close to that area that I mentioned before where the crossover of the what we call the revetment, where the sewer line goes across. And you can see that, once again, that situation does not improve. We still have very steep sides to the edges of the stream. Here is a slide that was taken in the spring of this year and was in fact the day that the DNR was over here with Marion and Kevin taking a look at the situation. What they would have hoped to have seen is the width of this stream very much widened out with water up onto those edges of the banks into the floodplain. But of course, as you can see here, even in spite of several heavy days of rain, that water is well within the confines of the stream. Further up there, you can see Asbury Road. You can see the road edge guards there and the culvert emptying into the stream. This shot was taken also in the spring. It was a good opportunity because without the vegetation growing over there, you could sort of see the edges of the stream here. So again, you could see the water inside the confines of the stream, but now we're revealing some of the areas on both the left and right of the stream bed of the flood banks, the floodplain, so to speak, that we'd like to see that water move into. Also in the picture there, you'll see a little bit of one parcel of the invasives. In this particular case, this is all bamboo there. Invasives are very notable during the off-season in the winter because they are the only green thing that is out there. So that is part of what was removed in some of our work that we did in this spring. Okay, in this one we pull back a little bit further, very revealing over here. So now you're seeing the south side of the creek, a little closer view of that parcel of bamboo. But now you're getting to see more of that floodplain that I had mentioned. So you can see it's an active floodplain. You can sort of see that black vein of marsh gunk from the typical of most healthy marshes over there. And this is where right now, that water that's there that's causing that is being serviced by the uphill area of the church properties that's further up Asbury Road. That's very much on a hill, and it all kind of comes down by natural lay of the land going into this area here. So you'll see that what we're going to want to do in the future over there, the DNR will be working on raising the bottom of that creek and placing several pooling areas there by which the water has an ability to get up onto this floodplain. And each of these pooling areas will be then connected into what they call a riffle area, which is a rocky stream area that connects one pool to the next to the next. And in doing so provides a much more productive ability for the water to be able to soak into the ground and slow down the rate of flow during heavy storms. This slide is what we call a panoramic slide that was taken by traveling the camera across a broad area there. So while it gets you the whole view, it does cause some degree of distortion, but nonetheless gives you a very good view of the overall landscape of the area. So this one shows very, very clearly now the floodplain that we're talking about. And you can see the floodplain has a huge capacity over there to be able to take on a significant amount of water. I might note that many of us, really prior to this point, were not fully cognizant of the fact that Berrywood owns both sides of the property on both sides of this stream over here. It's a very beautiful area on that side, very unspoiled. And the key thing over here is that there have been botanists from the DNR that have looked at this area, checked out some of the swamp plants that are growing there, and says that this bog is indicative of something that's been there for centuries. So it's really pretty exciting to know that but even gives us more drive to say we need to be able to preserve this bog and make it healthy again. This slide is in a little bit closer over here. In the lower right, you'll sort of see that yellow artifact. That is actually a manhole and represents the sewer line running parallel to the stream at this point, going out to Town Neck Road. So this one is more from a vegetation management standpoint. This was a photograph we had to put as part of our permit for removing the vegetation. But you'll see on the near side to us over here, which is on the opposite side of the stream from the athletic field, is what we call the canopy layer. We have very many beautiful trees over here that are very, very old. These are a lot of your oaks and other very old trees over here. And that's what we call the canopy layer. Then once we get to the other side of the stream, we still have some younger trees in that area, but then we're getting into what we call the understory layer. These are the trees that are growing underneath the top canopy trees over here and provide a feathered edge to the forest. All forests kind of like to do that. They don't like to have a stark edge of tall trees and then nothing, because when you do that, that's when you get a lot of invasives and weeds growing in that area. The more natural area, the more natural plan is for it to go into an understory layer. And this would be an example of these shorter trees would be some of your hollies, dogwood trees are a good example of that. They like to get that dappled sunlight on the edge of the forest. And then from there you would transition down into native shrubs. So I bring this up because this is what we will be doing, is restoring all of that natural edge of that forest in our work over here. Over here you see a current day photograph of the revetment area that I told you about. So you can see up in the upper left of the athletic field, you'll see the top of the manhole cover, which gives you the indication that that is the crossing area underneath there where that sewer main goes across. So as you had seen before in those photographs that were 10 years old, where there was a lot of concrete that was placed at the bottom of the creek bed, much of that is all gone now. And as a result of that being gone, the support structure that holds the concrete on the banks of this stream over here, you can see is all cantilevered over there. In the beginning of the spring, this photograph I had showed a very narrow fracture, if you will, of that concrete. 2 months later, you can see where it's completely cleft off. You could see that big gap. And that big black area that you see underneath that is like a siltation cloth that was underneath it. Why this is bad is because these concrete slag pieces are what breaks off. It gets into the river, and anytime there is a huge storm, it easily lifts this up and then places it downstream, causing all kind of artifacts to the flow of the creek that creates a tremendous amount of eddy currents that cause a lot of erosion to the sides of the stream. Here we see one of those pieces of slag that broke off. This particular one was moved in one of the storms that we had last year, that was at the same time where they were installing the new culvert. So many of the things that would have mediated that water flow were not in there during that time. Timing was very bad for a storm of that size to happen, but unfortunately it did. The result being the huge flow of water through that area lifted that concrete and placed this rather large piece downstream just a little bit. But you can see, while it might look somewhat innocuous, it causes great changes in the flow of the water, pushing it off to the sides and creating back eddy currents that have caused a lot of erosion to the one corner of the parking lot. So in this photograph over here, you see that erosion over here. That cliff over there on the very edge of the parking lot has very much been, it started back when, but very much was aggravated once that piece of concrete was introduced into the flow of the water. Anytime you go down there in which there's a heavy storm, you'll see a swirling eddy pool over there that is just continuing to scour out that area, causing a dangerous situation with regard to undercutting of the pavement. Here we have a tighter in shot here that shows further that level of erosion. There's not really much that can be done here to mediate this type of thing unless there's some major overhaul that's done into the flow of the creek. Here you see, as a result of some of the erosion along the other linear sides of the parking lot, that much of that has been undercut as well, very severely, to the point where the Marina Committee has put stakes out over there to prevent cars from traveling to those far edges. While it may look sound with the pavement being there, there isn't much structure underneath that, and that's why we want to make sure that folks in parking in that area, or more so in terms of lining their vehicles for backing the trailers into the ramp area there, don't get into the points where they get into trouble where that pavement would let go. Here you see one of those areas there of the very edge of the pavement, and then you can see how cantilevered it is over the soil. The photograph over here doesn't quite show the level of extent, but in some areas where we've had kayakers in the water being able to put their oar underneath the pavement, it was essentially in some areas half the length of the oar, which would put it in at several feet of overhang, a very dangerous situation. Here in another portion is again an area showing the amount of overhang or undercut, so to speak, of the pavement. Here we are down at basically at the end of the stream where it moves into the part of Cattail Creek, right by the launching ramp. So you can see this particular shot was taken on a very unique day. We were at a very, very low tide situation, and the wind was the prevailing winds were such that it was pushing much of the water out in the creek, which was a unique opportunity to do sort of a ground mapping, so to speak, of what the creek bed looked like. Here is where it, perhaps the first time in a long time, revealed a huge amount of siltation and sedimentation buildup that has all been deposited down at that end of the creek. In this slide, we see what I was talking about earlier, where we see the deposition of all of that silt that was picked up from the creek bed, and what came down to us from further up in the watershed has gotten all deposited down right around the area of the ramp. So you can see the ramp is comprised of 4 preformed concrete slabs. The 2 on the bottom are almost always underwater in most water level situations, and the 2 are at the top. And you can see here where the silt has already started to encroach on the bottom half of the top slab over there. So that's a lot of many yards of siltation that is all collected down there. Again, we mentioned the silt is not only a nuisance from a perspective of the last thing we want to do is have silt accumulation right at the launching ramp where you're going to be wanting deep water to be able to launch the boats, but also from a perspective of the damage that the silt itself causes with regard to, as we mentioned before, that clouding up of the water. Silt never goes away. It's so light that when it goes down to the bottom, anytime there's any kind of boat traffic, even wind motion and stuff can get this stuff back into the water column, and that causes the cloudiness, which again, as we mentioned before, is what prevents the subaquatic vegetation from growing, which is crucial to not only oxygenating the water, but providing habitat to all the crabs and spawning fish. In this slide, we kind of again see the level of siltation. You can also see, even though it's early spring, you can see on this particular day the kind of slime and anaerobic vegetation, if you will, that would be growing on the creek bottom. So you can see that green level of stuff growing on the creek bottom. Not sign of a healthy creek. And then, of course, you can see with the very narrow stream coming through there, the white sand that's really the ultimate bottom over there that's constantly getting scoured out, and then you can sort of see that fan of how that sort of in its own little microcosm there is creating, you know, a deposition of that silt coming further and further out into the stream. And then if you look at right at the water, on the right side of the water edge to the dry land area, you can see some of that, that slime growing on the bottom of the creek. Here's one more view showing the ramp in side profile over here. So you can see even on the near side over here that siltation buildup on the edge of the ramp is already up to halfway up the top block over there. You can see the beginning of the bottom block mostly covered by water down over there, so you can get an idea of the level of how much silt is starting to encroach upon the ramp there. Here's one more final view of the ramp where you can see that the silt is also building up along the creek edge over there as it's all piling up coming out of the stream, hooking over to the left, you know, depositing the silt. This is a good view to kind of show the construction of the ramp. You could sort of see all four of the concrete preforms, and if you look closely in the one in the upper right, you can see the holes there that are drilled to drive rebar in there to secure those concrete preforms into the ground. Okay, moving on. Here we show an example of some of the failure of the bulkhead. We just to give you a situational awareness, we're right next to the finger pier by the ramp. And you can see how the bottom part of that bulkhead is kicked out. That's a failure of those backing boards there in the bulkhead, and is something that kind of says that it's in need of being replaced. Here's a shot showing some of the overall decay of the macadam on the parking lot surface over there. Much of it is all spalled and broken out. In the next slide, you'll see others where we're cracked and having other vegetation growing in there, which is breaking up the tarmac even further. This picture I took of this is the Eastern District Police Station. It was recently built last year. It's one of the new buildings in the county that is a totally green building. And it has some interesting features in the parking lot of rain gardens for stormwater management. I took this particular photograph to kind of show you one of the things that we might be considering. There's lots of alternatives with regard to pervious pavement. This would be something where the water from the parking lot will be able to be absorbed into the ground instead of flowing over the bulkhead or down the ramp or into the creek. So this is an interesting blend here where you see the pervious part, of course, deals with the open joints that they have between these boxes, the blocks. And much like we would have a situation where there's certain load limits in terms of how much weight these can handle, they also have macadam in some of the main thoroughfares. So you can sort of see the tarmac as well as the pervious pavers. This is one of the alternatives that we're looking at with regard to new surfacing of the parking lot. Here we see some of the dry rot typical of many of the planking boards. This particular one is on one of the finger piers. Again, something in great need of repair and total redo. Very much things that we're worried about from a safety hazard standpoint. Here's a shot of one of the other areas of the overall decking. As you can see, it's got a significant amount of weathering and splinting. In this particular area there, you can see some butt joints that are really quite askew, causing trip hazards and the like. Okay, now we're going to go look into the vegetation management aspects that we had mentioned before. We did apply for a permit and a grant that was offered up by the Chesapeake Bay Trust and in collaboration with Anne Arundel Forestry. These funds on the Anne Arundel Forestry comes from your tax dollars paid to the county. And on the Chesapeake Bay Trust, that comes from a fund that is funded by the Chesapeake Bay Trust license plates that several people have. These are your dollars getting put to good use. This was a $2,500 grant that we've got that was to remove the invasive vegetation that we had in the area and replant it with native varieties. The main issues or the main thrusts over here is that non-native species, while the vegetation may look lush and green, very much unruly though, because it just grows over everything. It's not good, because what it does is, because of these plants not being native, a lot of the insect world does not visit those plants, which means that the birds and other mammals and stuff are not using that area. So the whole balance of the ecosystem is disrupted. They also are very aggressive in terms of killing the native species over there. So left unchecked, you really would, in a number of years, we would lose all of our canopy trees, and everything would kind of resort down to a tangled mess of vines and ground scrub. So it was important that DNR said that we, at this point in time, remove those and get ready for a reforestation plan. We'll be going through that very shortly. This particular signage over here represents one of the signs that is going to get posted when we finish the project out there by the Cattail Creek sign on Asbury Town Neck Road, and a smaller version of it that will be in the community right at the entrance to the Marina One area. Okay, so step one was to identify all the invasive parcels of vegetation that we had there to be able to secure our permit with Anne Arundel Forestry. So each one of these boxes kind of represent some square footage of invasives of various different types. So as an example, if we'll have some photographs of that. I'll take 2, 3, 4, and 8. 2, 3, and 4 are a predominance of something called Japanese honeysuckle. It's not like the North American honeysuckle. It takes over like wildfire and smothers all of your other trees, especially young sapling trees. Parcel number 8 you had already seen before in previous photographs. That was a large parcel of bamboo that's very aggressive grower. And then numerous other smaller parcels on the other side of the creek were what we call Asiatic bittersweet. These vines grow up trees and then smother the canopy and ultimately killing its host. We had a number of cases of that, of very, very mature vines. They're getting ready to kill some of our specimen oak trees, which we've reversed that, thankfully. We've also had smaller trees, saplings on the athletic field side that were completely smothered by the honeysuckle and the Asiatic bittersweet, which also we were able to free from bondage, so to speak. Happy to report that a month or so later, it looks like all of those saplings are in fact going to survive. So here we have some winter photographs that show the parcels 2, 3, 4 of the Japanese honeysuckle. So you can see it starts on the ground and then creeps up on some of your more valuable shrubs and small trees. Some of these were almost indistinguishable. We had no idea what was underneath some of these heavily growth areas there. And as you can see, like I mentioned before, the invasives are very notable by the fact that in the winter season over here, they're the only, or one of the few things that are green that are out there. Here you see in the springtime, once the warm weather comes, it starts to take off like wildfire with a very, very dense growth of vegetation. Here's another shot taken from the other side. Again, you could see it's a very prolific grower. One of the methods that we actually had pursued was to use goats. A herd of goats would be placed inside of a pen around the affected area. That method is most effective in areas that are completely overrun. Ours, while it was moderate, was not quite at that severe level. The problem with the goats is they're somewhat indiscriminate in that they will eat the good vegetation as well as the stuff that we want to remove. So we chose to go a route with having a man in the loop, so to speak, with a large crew that came in here that did a surgical removal with the hopes that we would be able to save many of our younger trees that were completely overrun with the Japanese honeysuckle and Asiatic bittersweet. Again, here's some more areas that were taken in the springtime. So all you see there are a number of clumps for which we didn't necessarily know what was underneath there. And then you'll see how the step-by-step process that was taken to remove that and the trees that were underneath them. Here's yet one more shot of just showing the level at which it was growing on the ground. In many cases, these will mound up where there's nothing underneath it at all. One level of invasive grows on top of the other. Here we see a young cherry tree over here that had succumbed to the Asiatic bittersweet. You could see it's pretty oppressive in terms of starting down at the base and meandering its around, completely enveloping the trunk area and then growing on top of the canopy of the tree. Here we move down to the other parcel, number 8, that I mentioned, that this was a huge crop of bamboo. You'll see that amongst that, in that parcel over there, we had some very nice specimen sycamore trees that were endangered of being choked out. And here's that photograph we mentioned. You could see a nice sycamore tree amongst there. Happy to report that all this bamboo has been removed. And with this nice wet spring that we've had, the sycamore trees are in very good shape. Here we are on the far side of the stream, meaning not the side of the athletic field, but on the other side of the stream. You can see one of the mature oak trees that are here, and here you could just see how much Asiatic bittersweet we had growing up as vines up these trees. It's a very tenacious vine. They usually end up, their growing habit is that they grow on top of each other to provide support and then reach over to the trunk and then wind up the trunk to the canopy. Left unchecked, it basically girdles the tree, and if that doesn't kill it, the smothering of the canopy just by taking out all the sunlight will completely kill the tree. Here's yet a shot of another tree there. You can see that these vines were, by their diameter, growing for quite a number of years, so it was quite an ordeal to be able to remove them from the tree. Next is a series of photographs we'll go through quickly that show the removal of the invasives. We had a team of about 8 different laborers out there removing each of the invasives. The Japanese honeysuckle, the Asiatic bittersweet, and the bamboo. Much of all that stuff, none of it was actually physically removed. After it was all removed, it was completely cut up and shredded into mulch using something called a brush hog. And then on the far side over there, we'll show photographs of that. The Asiatic bittersweet is cut down at the ground level and then up high, and then the ground level. A very surgically placed spray of herbicide is put on the end of the vine to be able to be absorbed and kill the root instantly. However, it's something that must be done as soon as the vine is cut. It can't be done days later. It must be done within minutes to be fully effective, and you'll see that process in a minute. In these photographs over here, we show the workers doing the careful aspect of removing the invasives from one of the trees. The tools that they're using looks pretty much like a large hedge trimmer that's on the end of a pole saw type of implement over here. And you can see in the successive photographs here, it's a layering process of take off one layer, take a look and see where you are, and then move down one layer at a time. Here we can see one of the liberated trees. In this case, it's a willow oak. You could see that it's not looking too good with not too many leaves on it, which is exactly what the invasives do. They block out all the sunlight, take up a lot of the water and the nutrients, so it kind of it provides a nice platform for them to move up into the canopy to get to the sunlight and will kill the host. Happy to say in this case here that the willow oak is doing well. It looks like it's going to survive. This photograph also shows what I was talking to you about before, the brush hog. So that after all this stuff was clipped and on the ground, that device over there basically kind of mulches it in place. Very difficult task still yet to do with many of those things, because a lot of them are vine-like natures and can get very much into a tangled weave. So it'll be something that we're going to have to contend with in terms of continuing to keep these invasives out. Here you can see how the same tools were used for leveling the bamboo vegetation. And bamboo is a very prolific grower, so it does represent quite some follow-up maintenance of us always going out there to make sure that any of the new sprouts are suppressed. And the main strategy over here was that this was done in the mid-May timeframe. It was in the wake of having a lot of heavy rainfalls before that. A good time because the root systems will put a lot of energy into creating a lot of the top growth, and that's exactly when you want to cut it off, because then that, of course, cuts off the food supply of the upper part of the plant being able to, through photosynthesis, to create the nutrients. And then with that, it kind of very much weakens the root structure. The main hope here is to be able to get rid of them with the minimum use of herbicides and the like. Over here we move to the other side of the creek now, and you see Brian Knox, who is the head of Sustainable Management Systems over here, is working on cutting out the Asiatic bittersweet mature vines there. So you can see that what's done is it's clipped low at the ground level and then up higher, and then it's important to remove the vines that are still encircling the trunk of the tree, so that even when they're dead, they do not end up being a girdling device on the tree that will kill it. What's done for the Asiatic bittersweet is a very surgical strike of using, in a very selective manner, herbicide. You'll see that Brian has in there a dye-indicative herbicide. That means with this fluorescent dye, when it's applied, he can go back and make sure that he caught all of the areas that needed to be done. So what happens is that when the vines are cut at the bottom, then instantly the herbicide is applied to that end of that butt end of that vine there. If you take a look in the lower bottom of the photograph, you'll see one little green spot over there that indicates where the vine was killed. It's not necessary to do that for the upper part of the vine, because once it's cut off, it dies. However, it does need to be, as I said, unwrapped from around the trunk. So here you can see it was freed from bondage, so to speak. The vines were unwrapped. You can sort of see how the vines that were closely wrapped, that were girdling the trunk, leave almost what looks like scorch marks, a burn along the chafe marks on the bark. One of the things that happened after we had relieved this tree of these choking vines was an artifact that was on the trunk of this particular one, which is, we kind of named this tree Old Eagle Eye, and you'll see in the next photograph why we call it as such. So at first, what you notice over here is the chafe mark from the vine, but then of course if you look just above that, you'll see something that looks remarkably feature in the bark there that looks, you can see the eye, the beak, it looks like the head of an eagle, even including a sort of a white band of collar feathers there. Here is a panoramic shot that was taken right after the invasives removal. So you can see with a new haircut there, everything looks very clean and neat. We're actually getting able to see the stream from the athletic field, and something that we're going to be maintaining over a period of time until we get ready for the planting of the new native plants, which presently is scheduled for the fall of this year. Here's some more slides of closer in of the removal of the invasives, and from here you can make out in the first slide 5 of the saplings. I think there was a total of about maybe 10 to 12 that were saved, and then the subsequent closer in shots that you see there, you can see how even the Asiatic bittersweet that we had showed you on one of those cherry trees there was completely removed. All trees seem to be doing very well, thankfully, because of the wet spring that we had and some good weather. These photographs are on the far side of the creek now, and I wanted to show you now that we're in the spring, that this was taken in the spring and early summer, on how some of the native bog plants have grown up very significantly. These 2 shots over here show a very active grower of what's called skunk cabbage, probably because of the smell that it creates if you were to break up the leaves there. But they are a very water-thirsty plant that does a lot in terms of drinking up water, as well as very good biofiltration of the water. So here's the case of where right now these plants are only benefiting from the storm water that's coming down from Asbury Road up on the hill from the church property, but is not benefiting yet the waters that the creek is providing until we connect the two, so to speak, by the methods that we mentioned, by putting in the pools and the riffle areas. This is the plantings plan that needed to be provided for both our permit to the county as well as our grant, and shows what I had mentioned before of the gradual feathering of the forested area there. So remember before what we said is we had the tall canopy trees that were on the far side of the creek, on the stream. A few more of those on the near side of the creek by the athletic field. And then you'll see a number of these trees that all represent their full-grown canopy widths, so to speak, of understory trees, and then followed by the native shrubs. So examples of the trees that you see there are serviceberry, eastern redbud, sweet bay magnolia, flowering dogwood, silky willow. You're probably familiar with some of these species because you have them in your own yards, like flowering dogwood. Eastern redbud is a very pretty tree that there's some around in Berrywood. Some folks have got sweet bay magnolia as well. Serviceberry and silky willow are also very attractive trees that are native. And the key things over here is all of these trees were picked not only because they were native, but their natural habitat is the edges of streams and in wetland areas. So they are used to being in areas that may be underwater or saturated for weeks at a time and that type of thing. And then underneath that, in the smaller circles, you see they're color-coded of other shrubs, the black haw, possum haw, swamp rose, high bush blueberry, spice bush, silky dogwood, sweet pepper bush, and button bush. Many of those you may not be familiar with, others might be, but those are very much driven towards being friendly to pollinators, hummingbirds, butterflies, bees, and also having what we call a high wildlife value. So throughout the year, there will always be flowers, berries, and these seeds and these types of things that are going to be able to attract all of the birds and wildlife back to the area. The key thing here with having this as a landscaping that has all the natives in there, it's sort of self-equalizing. These keep each one of them all in checks and balances. They naturally compete with each other, but it is not something that we need to go in there and trim and fertilize and cut. An example of that as an ornamental would be an azalea. Azaleas are not, they're pretty, but they're not necessarily something that is native to the area and is more applicable for your home garden, not necessarily something for we want here that is going to be sort of self-attending. So in the next couple of slides, I'll show you that we'll show some actual photographs of what do these plants actually look like. Okay, here's a photo collage I prepared that basically shows what all of these plants look like at different stages. So you can see the swamp rose is a very pretty flowering bush. Of course, the high bush blueberry, the black haw, you can see that that's in the fall where you got some very pretty foliage there with very bright blueberries type of thing. The possum haw, those are the berries that you'll see in the fall. And then the button bush and sweet pepper bush, as well as the spice bush. Okay, here we have the native tree plantings that are planned. At the top is flowering dogwood, which all of you are familiar with, as well as the sweet-baked magnolia. There's the eastern redbud, which is a beautiful show of color in the springtime. Again, provides a lot of food for pollinators early in the springtime. You've also got the silky willow. You can see it's a very interesting tree. It's got a beautiful colored green on the willow leaves, but then also in the springtime there, again, something very much attractant to the pollinators. So with this, it's like we said, the combination of the shrubs and the trees is all to create a natural balance of the native plantings there to get ourselves back to way perhaps it was many, many years ago before it was ever developed over here. Well, this brings us back to home. Here we are in Marina One. We gave you a tour of the watershed, a little bit of the history, a little flavor of what we're looking for in our go-forward plans over here. We're at a very early development stage of the design, having just a mere concept. Right now, the state has said that they moved on to the next level of funding for the design contract, which is very good. So just like we had the community meeting last month on June 1st, we plan to have further informational meetings. We want your involvement. We will, this fall, when we get ready to plant, we will be needing a lot of volunteers to be able to help with the plantings. Chesapeake Bay Trust, Anne Arundel Forestry very much urged us to make a big deal about that, bringing the press out, taking photographs, getting articles put into the newspaper to kind of create an awareness, pretty much holding up Berrywood as an example in this area here. So in the future, what we want you to do is to stay involved, ask questions. The Watershed Committee, the BCA, and the Marina Committee fully plan to have informational meetings as we move along each step of the road. We feel very, very fortunate and that we really have this gift of the Magathie and the Cattail Creek, and very much want to, as good stewards of the land and of the streams, help it for future generations to enjoy. And then with regard to the infrastructure that we have here, to coordinate the improvement of that so that is all in concert with creating a holistic plan that really will help Berrywood and the stream and the forested land and the creek for future generations yet to come. Thank you.